Hi, good afternoon, Michelle. How are you today?
Hi, Diana. How are you?
You are live from your beautiful RV motorhome, and thank you for enduring the 95-degree weather and not turning on your AC so we can hear your voice. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Michelle Fishburne is one of our inspiring storytellers that will be coming to you live on October 21st and 22nd to share her third act quest story. So for today, we're just going to get to know a little bit about Michelle and what she's doing. I'll tell you just a few things about Michelle ahead of time, and then we're going to let her share. So her third act story is really extraordinary. In fact, she's really done something completely unique that no one else has ever done. She drove 12,000 miles over the United States from September of 2020 to September of 2021. Thank you, COVID. Interviewing people about their lives during the pandemic. And now, coming soon in March of 23 is her book, Who We Are Now, 101 Stories of What Americans Lost and Found During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Now, this is a very exciting quest you've been on, and what I'd love for you to share, now you'll share the complete story of the moments, the decisions, the ahas you had that led you on this journey, but I'd love to just hear a little bit about how it was, what it was like on this 12,000 mile journey.
It was empty. When I first went out, one of the things that happened that was so unusual was I went to one of those visitor centers that they have, and you drive into each state, and went into the West Virginia Visitor Center. And when I walked in, you know how they have walls and walls of brochures? There were no brochures.
Oh, man.
All the walls were empty. And I went up to the staff person who was there and I said, COVID? And she said, yeah, we don't have anything that somebody can, touch and leave for others. And so, so that was my first jolt of this trip is going to be very different.
Wow. So leading up to your decision to take this trip, tell us a little bit about you and the journey you've been on before this journey.
Well, as a lot of people who are more mature in their age, I have had a lot of different jobs. An international trade lawyer in Washington, D.C., and then I was a homeschool educator, and then I found my love for public relations. And so when COVID hit, I was a full-time PR person in a job that I loved. And then that went away, and I had to scramble and figure out something different. And that's what I found was I decided just to get in my motorhome and drive all over and interview people as a project because I was really interested. I had no idea it was going to be a book. I'm thrilled that it is going to be a book. And when I have gone back and looked at some of the stories and when some of the people who gave me their stories have gone back and looked at them, they said it's like a time capsule. It's this time where we were at the very beginning and we were innocents, really. And
we were scared, very scared.
Yes. Well, I think so that's the interesting thing. The peer reviewers who have read the book have said it's like a roller coaster ride. And you don't know from story to story what their perspective is going to be, because there are plenty of people who lived in very open spaces whose life wasn't really affected by the pandemic in the beginning. And I would say, how has your life been affected? And they said, not so much actually. So it's and there were plenty of people who thought back in those days that once we did the vaccines we were going to be fine and that this was going to run its course. And so it really was an age of innocence. And it's so funny because when I went out on the road to do this in September 2020, I thought I had missed it. It's like, darn, I should have done this earlier.
And now you're still on the road. Do you ever think, man, I should be doing it again? Phase 2?
Well, right now I'm prepping for the PR for the first book. And I said the first book, right? That's coming out in March. And I also have a part-time job now, so that's taking time. And I'm still a mom. And I'm still a daughter. So you get that. I still have a lot going on. But the next part, because I just said the first book, once I get on the book tour and start really getting out there again in April, May, I'm going to be starting on the next book and interviewing people again. And that won't be about COVID. It will actually be about, it's called Who We Are Now is the first book, but this is going to be Who We Are Now. This is the working title. Who We Are Now, more in common than not, ? And I plan to try to interview people from the entire spectrum and see how it shakes out. I don't have any preconceptions. And so we'll see how it goes.
So I would say that your actions and your continued actions are all about a leap of faith. And, people like to say it's about the journey, not the destination. You certainly plan well when you're traveling and things like that, but you have amazing courage.
Well, I don't think of it as courage. I don't think I'm brave at all, to be honest with you. I don't think of it as courage. I think of it as, I don't know. I've just always had this unshakable confidence in myself. And when you have an unshakable confidence, you don't really need courage.
Confidence plus, it seems, and tell me if I'm right here, curiosity.
Curiosity, yes. I'm going to go back to something you said. You said that, people say it's about the journey, not the destination. I don't agree.
Okay, go for it.
And this is the reason why I don't agree. I think it's really important to have a general destination in mind.
Yeah.
Because then one can focus one's efforts and one's talents and one's excitement and one's anticipation and one's visualization of what's going to happen. And if you don't have a destination, I find that's very, very difficult to do. And so that's why I have a working title for the second book, because if I don't, I can't run towards that. And I think a lot of CEOs, a lot of people who start up their own companies would probably agree that you need to know your intended destination. It doesn't mean it's going to be a straight line to it, because it won't. And it doesn't mean that your destination won't change by a little bit here or there as you learn, as you adjust your sails to the wind. But I really think part of the excitement of life is having an intended destination and going for it.
Well, I absolutely appreciate that and agree. I think too, one of the things I want to add to your sort of this journey analogy, I like to say that after these years that we've been on this planet, it's almost like it's our internal why, something that turns us on, what our values are. And hearing the name of your working title of your next book, I get a sense of what those values are for you and your why. So that's like this little GPS that's guiding you, right? And it's, and it's coupled with a vision as well. So I'm excited as you embark on that. So talk to me a little bit about, you've given some really good advice or philosophies of the way you live your life, but give me a little bit of advice you would give to other women who are perhaps stuck or feeling uncomfortable with making a decision to make a change that's more in line with their why, or something that really means a lot to them, what would you advise them?
And I'm going to throw way back to my mid 30s to answer this.
Good.
So when I was 35 and I was an international trade attorney in DC and flying all over the world and had an entire closet full of black tie dresses, and I got pregnant with my first child, and I had a $30,000 a year nanny who would come during the day to take care of my baby. But I knew in my gut that I didn't think I could do that. I thought, well, this is just me personally, my view was, if you're going to have a child, you shouldn't have them be raised by somebody else 10 hours a day. And that was strong in me, but I had this great job. And so I was torn. And so I wasn't really stuck. Most people wouldn't have said I was stuck. You look at it and you think, oh, she's making a lot of money. She's this high flying attorney. She's got a nanny. She's got it made. But I was torn, and I was in an airport during my first month of being on the road and pumping and everything so I can get back to my baby. And I was sitting there waiting for my flight, and I heard somebody talking about making a decision about walking away from a job and staying at home with their child. And so, as most women do, I collect information from other people, right? We learn from each other. That's why I like 333 collective that you have. And we learn from each other. And so I leaned over and I said, I'm trying to make this decision. And she said something I'll never forget, which is, if there's a part of you that thinks you want to stay home with your child, then you need to listen to that and give it a try. You won't regret walking away from a job, because you can always get another job. But if you don't give it a try to be home with your child, you can't get that back. And so I flew home and I thought, I need to listen to my compass. And so I became not only a stay-at-home mom, I became a homeschool educator, and it was the best time of my life. And so that listening to oneself. And so I think that's one of the cores of making hard decisions. And people thought I was nuts. People in the law firm said to me, you're going to regret this. People and the women said, you mean you went and got a law degree and you just spent all this time and you're at this level of your career and you're going to walk away? You're going to really regret this. You're going to be back. And I wasn't.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice, which is still, as we get older, some of us have a hard time listening to what's really calling from our hearts, because we think we have to perform at some level that the culture, the society thinks, or our family thinks. So I think that's one of the things that I love so much about this, what I call the third act, is if you haven't been able to follow your heart and listen, I like to say, as the end zone becomes clearer and clearer, you don't want to spend one more day doing something that isn't following that.
It's never too late. It's never too late. A book that was very influential for me was 5 Regrets People Have Before Dying.
Yeah.
And if you've never read that book, that is something that will center you in a heartbeat. And it's short, and it's probably an hour and a half read, but you walk away from it thinking it really is important to listen to yourself and have the life that you want. And one of the things about the third act is a lot of us stayed between the lines and did the one step after another and have the 401ks or have the this or have the that. And then we get to this point, and you're right. If there's something that's inside you that you've always wanted to do, that's the great thing about the third act is listen to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen to that and take just one step at a time. And, one of the things I also just want to ask you too, because it's clear that you were comfortable and very happy with your decision, but all of your decisions along the way are coming from your gut or your heart, whatever you want to call it. But having a beginner's mindset or being curious and not afraid to be a beginner is something that we also shed that need to be the expert. So, you know, you're probably a great writer when you were an attorney, but did you ever imagine you would be publishing a book?
Well, number one, I didn't write the book. I didn't. I wrote the first chapter, which is only like 3 pages. The rest of it, they're all first person stories. And so I didn't have to write the book, which is the beauty of this kind of a book.
Well,
And
I'm gonna say to you, you wrote the book because you pulled out the stories, you interviewed the story, you were the witness, you were the
I was the story collector.
Yes, you were the story
I
collector.
was story collector. And also I have to say that I haven't always followed my heart. I think one of the things is, and I'm seeing this with my own kids, which is, in the early part of my life, it was all about what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do next? And I completely bought into the shoulds. And I went to I got good grades. I went to a good college. I went to a good law school. I went to a law firm. I worked my tail off. I did all of the shoulds. And it wasn't necessarily that I was following my heart. I was just following a path that seemed okay. It seemed like, yeah. And I really didn't want to be an outlier. But once I got off the track and started staying at home and became a homeschool educator, being an outlier felt more comfortable. In fact, one of my neighbors said to me, Michelle, why do you always have to be different?
Interesting that she saw it that way, as opposed to why are you just being you?
Yeah. So, I think one of the things too is, I saw a quote recently that said something like, as Americans, you have to get it right because you can only deploy the parachute once. And so I deployed my parachute in the beginning like I was supposed to. And it's true that if I hadn't done that, I would not be in the position I'm in now. Yes. To be able to explore the third act the way I want to in my 50s. So one of the things is, once we sort of wake up and realize that we haven't been paying attention to our heart's desire, if we've done the opening our parachute right the first time, then we've set ourselves up for this third act.
Well said. Well said. I can't wait for you to share more of the story of the onset of the pandemic that led you on this amazing trip and journey. And in the meantime, though, I would like to ask you to share a one-line or something you put on a bumper sticker, if you could, that encapsulates your philosophy of life and living.
Well, it's just a lesson I learned. I would put on a bumper sticker, please move my cheese. Now, that may not make much sense to most people, but another book I encourage people to get and to read is Who Moved My Cheese? I think it's from the 90s, maybe the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And it's about Who Moved My Cheese is about those moments in life where things go sideways and we have to adjust. And it likens it to 2 mice in a maze, and they run to this little place in the maze, and the cheese is always there every day, and then one day it's not. And one of the mice keeps going back to that same place, waiting for the cheese to come. And the other mouse finally says, after a few days, it's not coming back. I'm going to need to go out to the maze and find a new cheese. It won't be the same. It won't taste it. I might even like it more. Do you want to come with me? And the other mouse says, no, thanks. I got this. So it's about adjusting when things go sideways. And if I had not lost my job during COVID, I would not have a book, and I would be still in my house, and I'd still be doing my job. and my life would not be as rich. And so I think sometimes we should ask for things to be made uncomfortable in ways that help us really figure out what we want to do. So I would say, please move my cheese. Not too often because it gets a little crazy, but
or change the variety of cheese also, please.
yeah. So, but please move my cheese, because I think it when our lives change, this is another metaphor. I think of ourselves as kaleidoscopes. You know how when you have a kaleidoscope, you have all those little different colored pieces in it? I think that's the way we are. And as we grow, the vision in the kaleidoscope changes, because we change it by like 5% here, or sometimes 10%. And when something goes sideways and we have to readjust, or we take that moment to readjust, we end up seeing a different version of ourselves, just like you see a different version of the kaleidoscope. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about life. And if everything stays the same all the time, you miss out on that.
Well, here's to change, and here's to having your cheese moved. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. Now go turn on your AC and cool down. And I really look forward to having you join us in October for the storytelling event. Thank you, Michelle.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, Diana.